Tashdile and welcome to In Conversation with Tibet TV. This is Sakina Bhatt. For today's episode, I have with me an Honorable Geshe who has served His Holiness the Dalai Lama as his official translator for 16 years. He is the trustee of the Foundation of Universal Responsibility established by His Holiness. He is currently serving as the Director of Library of Tibetan Works and Archives and Head of Science Education Project. His name is Geshe Lhakdor. It's lovely to have you here, Geshe. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Geshe, you have been working in the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives for over 14 years, and we have heard that there is a science and Buddhist project that is held there. We also see that there is this growing interest on Buddhist philosophy and science from the Western liberal society and the scientific communities. In fact, a lot of conferences and dialogues are held on science and Buddhism to understand the workings of mind and emotion. So what brings the Western scientists and the Buddhists in a parallel platform, and how important are these exchange programs?
Science is today in the modern world one of the most important discipline which has benefited millions of people. But so far science explores primarily the external world, whereas Buddhism in its more than 2,500 years old has the great experience of exploring the inner world, the human emotions and so forth. Despite a lot of technological and scientific progress, what we are suffering today is from mental illnesses like depression and so forth. So therefore, there is a lot to learn with respect to the physical world for the Buddhists from science, and for the science there is a lot to learn from how to tackle with these emotional problems. So therefore, His Holiness has made this very strong initiative. Not only he himself participated in many of the Mind Life conferences and so forth, but he also encouraged the monastics to study science. And the library is privileged to say that since 1999, we have been looking after this science project, and so far we have taught several thousands of monks in different monasteries.
So Geshe, I have listened to most of your talks on happiness, and in most of your talks you normally say that happiness is not something that we learn from our religion or is taught by our parents, but it is something that we are born with that urge. So what is happiness to you, and how do you define happiness?
Yeah, you're right. In many of my talks I've been saying that the wish to have happiness is not something you learn from your parents or from your religion, but you are born with it.
Yes.
And in fact, I jokingly tell people that the first thing that the child does after birth is crying, and the child is virtually crying for happiness. Now, many people misunderstand the meaning of happiness. They misunderstand happiness with pleasure. Pleasures are experienced by the senses. Happiness is something that must be cultivated with one's mind, number one. Number two, many people again misunderstand by thinking that you will be happy after many, many years of hard work. After going to university, after getting married, after getting a good job, then I'll be happy. That is misplaced happiness. So it's important that we need to realize that happiness is something that one must cultivate each and every moment. So basically happiness is mental satisfaction.
What do you mean by misplaced happiness? Can you give an example?
Misplaced happiness means, for example, today the world is running. Everybody says, I'm busy. Now if you look carefully, they are primarily busy in the pursuit of 5 or 6 sensual objects. Now by running after the 5 or 6 sensual objects, if we are going to get happiness, then by this time we should be relatively happy. Like for example, if gold is found on this side of the mountain, then you must go this side of the mountain dig, not on the other side. When you search happiness, it has to be sought within one's own mind, one's own way of looking at things, one's own mental perspective. So there lies the solution.
So Geshe, irrespective of an individual's background, everybody wants happiness and nobody wants suffering in their life.
Exactly.
But even today we see that there is a lot of violence going on in the name of nationality, race, religion and so on. So we as humanity, what do we lack, and how can we avoid these kinds of problems?
Yes, you are right. We are not getting the happiness that we want because we, as I said already, we are searching in the wrong place. We all have this very strong tendency to fulfill one's own aspirations and wishes. That is fine, but if you do it at the cost of neglecting the well-being of others, if you see yourself as almost like the most important thing in the world, and then you are not going to get that happiness, because we are live in a world which is very heavily interconnected, interrelated. That the more you take responsibility and the more you see the interconnected reality, the more you will be in a better position to live in a harmonious life.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama often emphasizes the need for a radical change in the modern education system, which focuses more on materialistic development and lesser on the development of mind. So what is your take on the modern education system?
Instead, I would prefer using the word present day education system rather than modern education system. Present day education system. Because the word modern is, again, a concept which is very strongly misunderstood.
And
because
why is
today when we talk about modernization, people immediately think about tall buildings and shiny roads. Then people say, wow, very developed country. But the original idea of modernization is not the external material development. That the original idea of modernization is also internal development. Now, in the present day system of education, people, as you mentioned, focusing primarily on material development, and that also not in an honest way. So long as you are able to, get money, you are ready to cut other people's throat. You are ready to engage in corruption, bribery, and so forth. Education is not just literacy. Education primarily means human flourishment. And that human flourishment will come only from developing a proper holistic mental perspective. So that's why, of course, His Holiness is right that the present day education system is not enough for having that long-lasting happiness which we all are looking forward.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama has added another commitment in his life, which is about reviving what he calls it the revival of ancient Indian knowledge and wisdom, which is primarily derived from the Nalanda tradition. So you, as the former translator of His Holiness and someone who has observed His Holiness from a close range, so how important do you think this commitment is, and what contribution can it give to India in particular and the world at large?
His Holiness is always concerned about well-being of all sentient beings. So if you look carefully with all his endeavors and initiatives, they're all driven towards how to make this world a happier place to live. Despite unthinkable material development, still people are suffering from loneliness, depression, low self-esteem, and so many other kind of modern diseases. So what is lacking, if you look carefully, is again having not paid enough attention to the functions of human mind, human emotions. So with regard to regulation of human emotions and transformation of human mind, and to live a realistic life, there is a lot to draw from ancient Indian thoughts, including Nalanda tradition. So His Holiness is primarily talking about the ideas of using logic and reasoning to get the realistic point of view. And then secondly, study on human mind or human psychology for regulation of human emotion. These two, when he is talking about reviving ancient Indian tradition, is primarily talking about these 2 points.
So basically what you're trying to say is that it's not just from the materialistic things that we gain happiness. The happiness should come from within, and
Absolutely.
we should understand the workings of mind and emotions.
Absolutely.
And that's how we get rid of all these depressions and loneliness.
Exactly. Now it's not only Buddhism saying, today scientifically it is proved. That's why now you have seen that in the West there's so much talk about mindfulness practice and meditation practice. Because scientifically now they are able to see the benefits of meditation, benefits of mindfulness. So therefore in one of the Buddha's teaching, the Buddha says, your mind should not be like a piece of cotton. Which can be easily blown towards all sides with a slight blow of wind. Our mind is like that, very fragile. So that fragility of the mind can be stopped. You can strengthen your mind by developing right mental perspective. And once you are able to develop that right mental perspective, the changes and upheavals that's happening outside will not shake you, will not trouble you. Of course, it needs a lot of training.
So Geshe, tell us something about the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, and what does it do to contribute for the preservation of Tibetan identity and culture?
It's very interesting. When we came into exile, the individual Tibetans, they were primarily concerned about few things. One, each of the individual families tried to bring some holy artifacts, be it a small scripture or image and things like that. That was one important thing. Second thing was, with them they brought their kids, their children. So after coming into exile, they wanted to offer both of these to His Holiness. Take our children for education. Take these artifacts, because His Holiness, you are the best to preserve these things. So that, in short, that is the story. Much of these artifacts and images and scriptures that we have in the library collection is primarily those that are donated to His Holiness by different individuals and families. Okay. And therefore His Holiness said, now we should open a separate center, which is now the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, so that people can really study, see, and pay their homage to these artifacts. Although library is a small institute, but our task is immense in the sense because we are supposed to be the custodian of these very sacred and important holy images. But what is really important for us is teaching the Tibetan culture, Tibetan values, Tibetan Buddhism to people. So I'm happy to say that so far several thousands of Westerners and Tibetans and Indians or Asians have studied and educated in Dharamsala.
Okay, so Geshe, finally, what is your piece of advice to the young Tibetans who are now considered the future of Tibet about the importance of preserving the Tibetan identity?
We are passing through a very difficult time. Okay, still we are in an outside country, living as a refuge. So we should not be living like those people who are living in a free country. We always have to remember that we are in exile, and we have this very important task of preserving Tibetan culture, which is primarily Buddhism and so forth. So the preserving of Tibetan culture is not an easy job. Number one, we are living in a modern world where there is so much distraction. Okay, so number two, the Tibetan culture is, Tibetan Buddhism and Tibetan culture is so rich and profound that unless you make some dedication, unless you make continuous effort, you are not going to even scratch the surface of that. So when we talk about preserving Tibetan culture, language, religion, it's not just being able to write few sentences and speak few Tibetan sentences. You really need to know the depth of that culture. And if you are able to do that, then you are preserving. Not only you can preserve, but you can also share it to the younger generation. So I'm concerned about that part, the preserving the real stuff.
Okay, Geshe, it was an honor to have you here in our show. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next episode of In Conversation with Tibet TV.